Hello and welcome to the Bricks and Mortar Leadership Podcast, where we use God's Word to teach foundational principles, show us not only how to live daily, but lead daily. I'm Kyle Milholland. I'm the president of Bricks and Mortar Leadership. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Well, I have a fantastic show for you guys today. While we talked last episode about one of my favorite topics, accountability, this week we're going to talk about one of my other favorite topics, which is actually communication. And we actually saw a little bit of a communication breakdown last week in the garden in that whole story. So if you haven't checked out that episode, head back and actually watch that episode. I'm sure you will get a lot out of it on the accountability side. But these two traits, communication and accountability, really are absolutely critical and foundational skills that each of us need to learn and need to master in order to have success in our life. Because if you think about it, every single relationship in our life and everything we set out to do revolves around having these two skills. And as a leader, if you do not have a good foundational basis in these two skills, you are going to suffer. It is 100%. It is going to happen, a guarantee. But if you really think about communication, which is again what we're going to focus on this week, imagine what will happen in your life if you strengthen your communication skills. It will literally improve every single relationship in your life. So whether that's your children, your spouse, your friends, your family, your coworkers, your boss, it literally will impact every single aspect of your life. And who doesn't communicate from the minute they wake up until the minute they go to sleep? We all do. So that's why it's so important to have this skill really set at a high level. Before we dive into today's show a little bit further, I'd love for you guys to head over to my website, bricksandmortarleadership.com. I recently was granted access to the John Maxwell Certified Training materials, so you are going to see some of that over there. If you click on the resources tab when you land on the website, you're going to get access to a bunch of free resources over there. And if you click on free training underneath that tab, you're actually going to see some of the upcoming trainings that we have that tie into that, which is a really fantastic opportunity that you should take advantage of. So without further ado, let's get into today's show. As you can see here, I have decided to title this show Communication Breakdown in Babel. I don't think that there is a story that better highlights the importance of communication versus the story of the Tower of Babel, right? Because what we can see in this particular case is because of mankind's wickedness and what's really going on here, and it's kind of fascinating when we understand what's really going on here, we find out how God decides he's going to handle that and punish mankind. And how he decides to punish mankind is a pretty good key indicator to just how important communication is. So we're going to go ahead and get into the text today. Now, the whole earth had one language and the same words. So I'm going to pause right there. Imagine if everyone on the earth at this particular time, but now imagine today, if everyone spoke the same language, wrote the same language, it would make us incredibly productive, and we would probably get ourselves into a lot of trouble because, as we know, as technology's progressed since this time, obviously several thousand years ago, moving forward, now we know how productive we can be when we have this technology in place to help kind of bridge some of these communication barriers. However, some of those technologies that we have put in place also cause a lot of problems, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit, and how we can leverage those in order to be better. So as we continue on, and as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. So just to phrase this and kind of give you the time frame of what we're talking about here, this is after the flood. Noah has gotten off the boat. It's in Ararat where the ark landed in Turkey, and we have now migrated east, okay? I know it kind of doesn't read that way, but that's really what has happened here, to the land of Shinar, kind of back towards probably more than likely what we believe was where the original Garden of Eden was, which makes sense. Mankind's going to want to travel back to where he came from. We see this all the time. We try to do the same thing. It's just the nature of who we are. So that's kind of what's happened here. They find this plain. They decide to get in one accord, and they start to work together. All right. And we're going to kind of see more of the story here of why they're doing this here in a second. But one of the things that's a huge clue to the mentality here that we see is they're using bitumen for mortar. Okay, so they've got these bricks. That's what they're using for stone. And they're using bitumen. So what bitumen is actually asphalt. And you may be thinking to yourself, how in the world did they have asphalt all the way back then? Because asphalt is typically nowadays made from petroleum. It's kind of have to go through a refining process. It's kind of a byproduct of other things that we refine. But bitumen is actually naturally found sometimes in bodies of water, in lake beds, in the ocean. And they have actually found this stuff. And some of the extra texts that we're going to get into today that I want to introduce you to are going to talk about this in a little bit more detail, which I find kind of fascinating. But what we know of asphalt that we typically use on the ground, it's waterproof. So what that is telling us is these people are trying to waterproof this structure. Now, why would they do that? They're doing that because they know the last time God got mad when they decided to do things that he didn't like and they weren't supposed to be doing, he flooded the earth. So mankind in his arrogance has now decided, I'm going to use this material. God's not going to do that again to us. We're going to waterproof this bad boy, and let's see what he does with that, which is kind of funny because God can do whatever he wants. And we're going to see how God winds up responding to this again a little bit later in some of the other texts, but I'm going to continue on for now. Then they said, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. Translated, we basically want to play God. We want to be God. We want to overthrow God. That's the mentality here. You couple that with the fact that we're using bitumen and trying to waterproof this structure, you can see that we have not set out with the best intentions. Now, I could get into a whole nother story as to what's really going on here. It goes back quite a ways. You do have to get into some other texts outside of the Bible to understand it more thoroughly. But for now, we're just going to continue on. And the Lord came down to see the city and tower, which the children of man had built. And the Lord said, behold, they are one people, and they have all one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. So again, God has recognized how strong people have become and how we are able to work together. These people were able to work together so well and be of one accord, even though it's an evil accord, to do these things because they have one language. So God has recognized how critical communication has been here in this particular instance, unfortunately negatively used for destructive purposes, and he's going to respond to that, and here's what he does next. Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, so that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. So how did God ruin the party? How did God get these people to stop doing this? He confounded the language, and which we still see today. We have all these different nations with all these different languages, and it creates a barrier for us to be able to do these types of things where we can work together and get ourselves in a lot of trouble. Now, communication is great. Being able to clearly communicate is great when your heart is in the right place. These folks' heart was definitely not in the right place, and they abused something that God made, which is a beautiful thing to be able to clearly communicate with another human being. God used the heart of communication to wreck the party, stop this in its tracks, and basically throw the brakes on this. Therefore, its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord dispersed them all over the face of the earth. So the thing that they didn't want to happen, God did. I am dispersing you throughout the earth, but not only am I doing that, I'm going to confound your language. So you're going to have to learn how to recommunicate with each other, and you're going to do it in different places. So you're going to do it over here, and you're going to do it over here, and you're going to do it over here, and none of you are going to be able to understand each other. That should probably put a little starch in your underwear, so you're not going to be able to do it just as easy as you did last time where you tried to play God and overthrow me, because that's just seemingly what you human beings like to do. So it's interesting that we use the term Babel, and I also find it fascinatingly interesting and probably not coincidental that we use language programs, and one of the language programs is Babel, that we try to now understand each other's language. Coincidence? I think not. Now, there is one other thing that I kind of want to dive into here because it is kind of fascinating. And this actually comes from another source. This is actually from something called the Book of Jubilees. And what this text does is this was actually found in Qumran. And I want to read this to you because it's kind of fascinating on this topic. Okay, so a little bonus today for your educational communicational lesson. We find in the Book of Jubilees, all right, that it says they built this tower for 43 years. That's how long they were building it for. Its breadth was 203 bricks and the height of a brick was 1/3 of one. Its height amounted to 5,433 cubits and 2 palms. And the extent of one wall was 13 times 600 feet and the other 30 times 600 feet. Okay, so we have kind of a rectangular structure, a massive rectangular structure. And here is how God destroyed the tower. Then Yah sent a mighty wind against the tower, and it fell to earth. And behold, it was between Ashur and Babylon in the land of Shinar, and they called its name Overthrow. I think that's a pretty fascinating story. And again, check out the Book of Jubilees. You won't regret it. It's filled with some pretty amazing information that does nothing but help enhance the Word of God. So, what are some other things that we can kind of look at for today and understand and learn how to communicate better as human beings? Well, one of the things I wanted to share with you is this, and you may have heard this before, but I love this teaching because it helps us understand how we as human beings communicate, and it does it in a pretty clear way. We really can break our communication with other people down into 3 categories: song, music, and dance. Song would be the words that you actually use in a conversation, okay? Music is how you say those words you use, and dance is actually your body language when you're saying those words. So for instance, if I just write words to you, that is only going to count for 10% of communication. However, when you hear the words that I'm saying, the inflection of my voice, now I'm communicating with you at a much higher level, all right? The words that I use actually count for 40%. And then believe it or not, our body language counts for 50% of our communication with another human being. If you don't believe that body language is powerful, you can literally express your emotions just with body language, and you don't have to say a word or utter a sound. There is no more powerful way to figure this out than drive on the highway for any length of time. Eventually, you will probably be given the single finger salute, and every single one of us knows and understands what that means because body language is very powerful. So let's talk about how we can kind of couple this with some of our communication methods, all right? And we know and we see all the time that now our primary communication languages are texting, email, social media, right? We are using these on an increasing amount every single day. Phone calls are becoming less often, and face-to-face interaction, heaven forbid, is becoming even less often, which is really sad. And isn't it funny that all of the things that we need to communicate more clearly with human beings, we're actually using less, and the things that we don't need to use, we're using more. So we can see under the song category, right? This is just the words that you use, are the texting, the emailing, and social media. When we communicate this way, no one can hear the tone of our voice. We can try to throw in exclamation points and dots and caps and all these things, but it's really a poor substitute for someone being able to hear the tone of your voice and see your body language when you're saying what you're saying. And we can clearly see this. And if I asked you to raise your hand right now, wherever you are, and if some kind of email that you have sent or read before has been misconstrued, or a text message, or something you've said on social media, we've all fallen guilty to it. We all know that. And that's because we're really only communicating at 10% effectiveness. However, when you pick up that phone and you actually call someone, all right, now you're combining song and music together, because not only are they hearing the words that you're saying, right, but they're hearing the inflection in your voice when you're saying it. Communication just improved to 50% effectiveness. So you literally just made a 5-fold improvement in communication because you decided to pick up the phone and call someone. That is huge, all right? And then finally, face-to-face interaction. You cannot communicate with another human being more clearly than you can with face-to-face interaction. Right now, if you're listening to this podcast, right, you are hearing me and you're seeing nothing, but you're hearing me and you're hearing the tone of my voice. So I'm communicating with you at a 50% effectiveness level. If you're watching this podcast, which I would encourage you to do, I'm communicating with you as best I can, right at 100%. You're hearing the inflection of my voice, you're seeing my body language, and you know the words that I'm using. So it's a poor substitute because there's a camera between us, but it's still at least 50% or better, probably closer to 100, right? Face-to-face interaction is so critically important because we have things that we need to convey, and we need to convey at a much clearer level than we can when we're emailing someone or we're sending them a text message or we're trying to communicate on social media. Face-to-face interaction and phone calls need to be more of the primary method on how you communicate with others versus the emailing, the texting, and the social media. I know a lot of times we like to avoid uncomfortable discussions and we hide behind that keyboard, but we cannot do that if we want to be good communicators. Try just emailing your spouse and never seeing them face to face. Right, we know how this is going to go. It's not going to happen, okay? So think about that the next time you start to communicate. Improve your communication by lessening the amount of emails, texting, and social media that you're using, and pick up that phone or actually go see someone face-to-face. Now, I understand there are times from a convenience perspective that you can't always do these things, but it is a good thing to keep in your toolbox of thought so that you know how to better communicate. All right, so let's bring it home for the day. What's the 3 takeaways for today? Number 1, communication is the key first step to succeeding in nearly anything we do. Most things that we set out to do are going to involve some form of communication along the way with someone, and it is critical that we know how to communicate effectively if we're going to succeed in life. Communication and accountability, remember, those are your 2. If you as a human being, as a leader, or whoever you are, can improve your communication and accountability skills, you're going to do very well in life. Number 2, be aware of how you communicate. Remember, song, music, and dance. Song, music, and dance. Again, we talked about this. Song, just the words you use. Music, how you say those words. And dance, your body language when you're saying them. And then finally, use the right form of communication for the situation. Face-to-face is the best. So we talked about this, not to beat a dead horse, but I think it's worth saying many, many times over because of how we are communicating, and we're increasing every day. The poorest forms of communication get used more, and the better forms of communication are being used less. Flip the script, help yourself out, and be a better communicator, okay? I promise it will work well for you. Well, my friends, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you listening to this podcast. If you would, please give me a like, follow, a share on whatever platform you're listening to this on or you're watching this on. I would really appreciate that. Also, don't forget to head over to my website, bricksandmortarleadership.com, and just click the red button to book your free consultation with me. We'll set aside 30 minutes to be able to talk together, and we can discuss your unique challenges with your team and figure out a plan to solve them. I actually have some upcoming masterminds too on the topic of communication. Again, I've been given access to the John Maxwell training platform, which is really filled with phenomenal content. But one of the things that I'm going to focus on that comes from there is a session based around John's best-selling book, Everyone Communicates, Few Connect. So if you guys want to learn more and you want to sign up for a fantastic 10-week mastermind course and improve your communication skills, I cannot recommend that highly enough. If you want to learn a little bit more about this particular topic, head on over, click that resources tab, click on free training, and I do have some free 1-hour trainings coming up on that same material from John. Everyone Communicates, Few Connect. So again, thank you guys very much for joining me today. God bless.